I was standing on my dock that Tuesday morning, coffee in hand, watching the mist roll off Crystal Lake like it had done every morning for the past 40 years of my life. This wasn't just any property. This was the land my grandfather had built with his own hands back in 1962, 40 acres of pure lakefront heaven that he'd passed down to me 2 years ago. The water was calm, reflecting the orange and pink streaks of sunrise, and my new boat, a gorgeous 32-foot cabin cruiser I'd named Second Wind, bobbed gently at the pier. I'd saved for 5 years to buy her, and she was perfect. Everything about that moment was perfect, actually. The birds were starting their morning songs, the coffee was hot and strong, and I had the whole day off to just enjoy my piece of paradise. I could hear the distant sound of someone's lawnmower across the lake, the peaceful hum of suburban life waking up. My dog Buster was sniffing around the shoreline, probably tracking some unfortunate fish that had washed up overnight. Life was good. Life was simple. I had no idea that in less than an hour my peaceful morning would turn into an absolute nightmare that would change everything about how I viewed my neighbors and what it meant to own property in this so-called community. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe because this story gets absolutely wild. Trust me, you won't believe where this goes. I was just about to head back inside for a second cup when I heard it, the unmistakable diesel rumble of a heavy truck coming down my private driveway. Now, I wasn't expecting any deliveries, no repair people, nothing. My driveway is long, about a quarter-mile from the main road, lined with oak trees that my grandfather planted decades ago. You can't just accidentally end up here. You have to make a deliberate choice to turn off the county road and drive all the way down. The sound got louder, closer, and I felt this weird knot forming in my stomach, that primal instinct that tells you something isn't right. Buster started barking, that deep warning bark he only uses when he senses a threat, not his usual excited yapping at squirrels. I walked around the side of my house, still holding my coffee mug, expecting maybe a lost Amazon driver or someone looking for a different address. Instead, what I saw made my blood run cold and my grip tighten on that mug so hard I thought it might shatter. A massive tow truck was backing down toward my dock, beeping that awful reverse warning sound that echoed across the water. But that wasn't even the worst part. Standing on my lawn, my private property, clipboard in hand like she owned the place, was Deborah Kensington. I'd met Deborah exactly 3 times before, and each encounter had been more insufferable than the last. She was the president of the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association, the gated community about half a mile down the shore, and she took her position more seriously than most people take their actual jobs. She was probably in her late 50s, always dressed like she was heading to a country club board meeting even when she was just checking her mailbox. Today it was crisp white linen pants, a navy blazer, and pearls at 9 in the morning. Her blonde hair was shellacked into place with what must have been half a can of hairspray, and she wore these oversized sunglasses that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," from 100 yards away. She was directing the tow truck driver with sharp, precise hand gestures, pointing at my boat like a general commanding troops into battle. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted, already jogging toward them, coffee sloshing out of my mug and burning my hand. The tow truck driver, a younger guy probably in his 20s with a nervous expression, looked up at me with obvious relief like he'd been hoping someone would intervene. Deborah, however, didn't even flinch. She looked up from her clipboard with this expression of supreme authority, like I was the one interrupting her important work, like I was the problem here. "Good morning," she said in that fake pleasant voice that people use when they're about to ruin your day but want to pretend they're being professional about it. "I'm here to facilitate the removal of your non-compliant watercraft from Crystal Lake premises. As you'll see here in Section 7.3, Subsection B of the Lakeview Estates Community Standards and Regulations." She held up a stapled packet of papers, waving them at me like they were some kind of magical legal document that gave her power over the entire universe. I stood there for a second, actually speechless, trying to process what I was hearing. Non-compliant watercraft, community standards. Was this woman seriously standing on my property trying to tow my boat based on rules from a homeowners association I wasn't even part of? "Deborah," I said, fighting to keep my voice level, "I don't live in Lakeview Estates. I'm not part of your HOA. This is my private property and that's my boat at my dock." She smiled, but it was that tight, condescending smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind that says I'm about to explain something very simple to someone very stupid. While technically correct that your residence is not within the Lakeview Estates boundaries, your property does border Crystal Lake, which falls under our community's jurisdiction for aesthetic and safety standards. Your vessel exceeds the maximum allowable length of 24 feet by a significant margin, and multiple residents have filed complaints about the visual impact and potential safety hazards. Visual impact? Safety hazards? My boat was Coast Guard approved, fully insured, and sitting at a private dock that my family had maintained for longer than Deborah had probably been alive. The tow truck driver was now standing beside his truck, looking extremely uncomfortable with this whole situation. "Ma'am," I said, trying a different approach and addressing him directly, "this is my property. I own this land, this dock, and that boat. I have the deed, the registration, everything. Do not touch my boat." He glanced nervously between me and Deborah, clearly calculating which one of us was more likely to cause him problems. "He's been authorized and fully compensated by the Lakeview Estates HOA Emergency Enforcement Fund," Deborah interjected smoothly, like she'd rehearsed this exact scenario. "The towing and storage fees have been covered, and you'll receive an invoice for any additional costs. I suggest you cooperate to avoid further complications." Further complications? This woman was threatening me on my own property. I pulled out my phone and started filming. "For the record, you are trespassing on private property, attempting to steal my boat based on fake authority, and I'm documenting everything." The tow truck driver's eyes went wide. "Whoa, wait, stealing, ma'am. Is this really?" He looked at Deborah. "You said this was all cleared legally." Deborah's face flushed red, but she maintained that rigid composure. "This is an enforcement action authorized by the HOA board. We have every right to maintain community standards, and if you refuse to comply, we will pursue legal action for violations including but not limited to disturbing the peace, creating visual pollution, and operating an oversized vessel in restricted waters." I almost laughed. Restricted waters. This is a natural lake. You don't own it. Your HOA doesn't own it. "And you certainly don't have any authority over what I do on my property." I turned back to the driver. "Sir, I'm asking you nicely one more time, do not touch my boat. If you do, I will press charges for theft and I will sue both you and whatever company you work for." That did it. He held up both hands in surrender. "Look, I don't get paid enough for this kind of drama. Ma'am," he nodded at Deborah, "you need to sort out whatever jurisdictional issues you got going on here. I'm not taking a boat when the owner's standing right here telling me not to." He climbed back into his truck, and despite Deborah's increasingly shrill protests, he backed up, turned around, and drove away. For a moment, Deborah and I just stood there in my yard, the morning bird still singing like nothing crazy had just happened. Her face had gone from red to almost purple, and I could see a vein throbbing in her temple. "This is completely unacceptable," she hissed. "I will be filing formal complaints with the county, the lake authority, and every relevant regulatory body. You cannot simply disregard established community standards because you think property ownership gives you unlimited rights." I stepped closer, making sure to stay out of arm's reach but getting my point across. "Deborah, let me be very clear, you have no authority here. None. Your HOA rules don't apply to me, and if you ever set foot on my property again without permission, I will have you arrested for trespassing. Do you understand?" She clutched her clipboard to her chest like a shield. "We'll see what the authorities have to say about that." And with that, she turned on her heel and marched back to her car, a silver Mercedes SUV that probably cost more than my boat. As she drove away, I noticed at least 3 of my neighbors from Lakeview Estates were standing at the edge of their yards watching the whole scene. Great, I thought, now I'm the neighborhood villain. But I wasn't about to back down. That afternoon, I drove to the county offices and got written confirmation that my property rights were absolute, that no HOA had any jurisdiction over a private dock on private land, and that my boat was completely legal and properly registered. I made copies, lots of copies. Over the next week, Deborah launched what I can only describe as a full-scale assault. I received 3 more violation notices taped to my door, each one more ridiculous than the last. One claimed my boat was a navigational hazard despite being clearly marked and lit. Another said I was violating community noise ordinances because my boat's engine was excessively loud. I'd only started it once, for literally 5 minutes in the middle of the afternoon. The third notice accused me of unauthorized commercial activity because apparently someone saw me letting my nephew ride on the boat, and Deborah had decided I must be running some kind of illegal charter service. Then came the petition. Deborah organized 12 families from Lakeview Estates to sign a formal complaint demanding I respect community standards and remove the offending vessel immediately to preserve property values and maintain the serene lake environment we all cherish. I recognized exactly 2 of the names on that petition as people I'd actually met. The rest were strangers passing judgment on my property based on Deborah's lies and exaggerations. I was angry, frustrated, and honestly starting to feel a bit paranoid every time I heard a car coming down my driveway. But I kept my boat exactly where it was because principle matters, and I wasn't about to let some power-hungry HOA president dictate what I could do on land my family had owned for over 60 years. I thought things couldn't possibly escalate further. I was wrong, so incredibly wrong. That Saturday, I had plans to take the boat out for the first proper trip, maybe do some fishing, enjoy the day. I woke up early, made breakfast, and was just grabbing my keys when I heard voices, lots of voices coming from outside. Not angry voices, but cheerful, chattering, the sound of families and children playing. I looked out my window and felt my jaw literally drop. There were at least 50 people on my beach, my private beach. They had set up folding tables with checkered tablecloths, coolers full of drinks, beach chairs, umbrellas, and kids were already splashing in the water off my dock. Someone had even brought a portable speaker playing classic rock. It looked like a full-blown beach party, and every single person there was trespassing on my property. I stormed outside, and that's when I saw her, Deborah, standing near the water's edge like a cruise director, gesturing broadly and holding court with a group of people who were hanging on her every word. And next year, I heard her say as I got closer, we're hopping to install community paddleboard racks right along the shoreline, maybe some bench seating for the sunset yoga classes, really make this a central gathering space for Lakeview families. I walked right up to her, not caring that I probably looked unhinged in my old fishing shirt and pajama pants. What the hell do you think you're doing? She turned to me with that same fake smile, but this time there was something triumphant in her eyes. Oh, good morning, we're having the annual Crystal Lake Appreciation Day. It's a beloved tradition going back to the 1980s when your grandfather so generously allowed community access. We're just continuing that legacy of neighborhood cooperation and get off my property. The words came out cold and flat. Excuse me, her smile faltered slightly. I said get off my property, all of you. Now, the conversations around us started dying down as people realized something was wrong. Deborah's face hardened. This is a community tradition. Your grandfather understood the importance of being a good neighbor, of contributing to the social fabric that makes this area special. We've had this event here for decades. I pulled out my phone and made a show of opening the camera app. You have 5 minutes to get everyone off my land before I call the police and have you all removed for trespassing. I'm not joking, Deborah, this ends today. A murmur went through the crowd. Some people were already starting to pack up, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation, but Deborah stood her ground. You're being completely unreasonable. These families, these children, they've been coming here for years. You can't just— I absolutely can. This is private property. My grandfather let you use it out of kindness, a handshake agreement that was never formalized, never put in writing. And you know what? He never tried to tow my boat. He never sent me threatening letters. He never treated me like a criminal for existing on my own land. So yeah, Deborah, I can absolutely kick you out, and I am. Her voice went shrill. We'll sue. We have established usage rights, implied easement. You can't just revoke decades of— I'd done my homework after the boat incident. I talked to a property lawyer who had explained very clearly that without a written easement, without any formal agreement, they had exactly zero legal claim to my beach. You have nothing, I said quietly. No easement, no rights, nothing but my grandfather's generosity, which you've completely disrespected. Now get everyone out of here before I make this a lot worse for you. It took nearly an hour to clear everyone out. Some families apologized as they left, genuinely embarrassed about the situation. Others shot me dirty looks, clearly believing whatever story Deborah had been feeding them about entitled property owners and community spirit. Deborah was the last to leave, standing at the property line with her arms crossed, shaking with rage. You'll regret this, she shouted across my lawn. The entire community will know what kind of selfish, petty person you are. You're destroying decades of tradition because of your ego? I didn't respond, just stood there and watched until her Mercedes disappeared down my driveway. Then I called my lawyer and asked him to draft a formal cease and desist letter, along with very clear property boundary markers. Within a week, I had no trespassing signs posted every 50 feet along my property line, security cameras installed, and a legal document making it crystal clear that no one from Lakeview Estates had any right to access my land or my beach. The lawyer's letter also included a threat of harassment charges if Deborah continued her campaign. That seemed to do the trick. The violation notices stopped, the petitions ended, and my driveway stayed blissfully empty of tow trucks. But the real satisfaction came about a month later when my one friend from Lakeview Estates, a guy named Marcus who'd always thought Deborah was ridiculous, stopped by with some interesting news. Apparently the HOA meeting following the beach incident had been absolute chaos. Members were furious that Deborah had been using their dues to pay for things like tow trucks and legal threats without board approval. Several families admitted they'd only signed the petition because Deborah had told them I was planning to build a commercial marina that would destroy the lake's ecosystem. Complete lies. Someone made a motion to remove her as president, and before they could even vote, Deborah resigned in a dramatic speech about ungrateful neighbors and her wasted years of service. Marcus, who was actually a reasonable human being, became the new president, and he came to my door a few weeks after that with a fruit basket and a genuine apology. We talked for over an hour and eventually worked out a real agreement, a formal license that let the HOA use a specific section of beach, away from my dock, with clear rules about capacity, frequency, and absolutely zero Deborah allowed. They even offered to help maintain that section, which seemed fair. As for Deborah, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd moved to a luxury condo building in the city, where I'm sure she's currently measuring the exact regulation height of everyone's potted plants and filing noise complaints about cooking smells. My boat is still docked right where she belongs, 32 beautiful feet of non-compliant vessel, and I added a little plaque to the slip that says Second Wind S 2023. Some evenings I take her out on the lake and cruise past the Lakeview Estates beach, where families are swimming and kids are jumping off what used to be my exclusive dock. They wave now, friendly and genuine, because most people aren't like Deborah. Most people understand respect, boundaries, and what it means to be an actual good neighbor. Authority isn't about titles or clipboards or having the loudest voice in the HOA meeting. Real authority comes from respecting others, from understanding that your rights end where someone else's begin, and from recognizing that kindness is a privilege, not an entitlement. If you enjoyed this story, smash that like button, subscribe for more wild Karen encounters, and comment below about the craziest HOA story you've ever heard. Trust me, after living through this, I want to hear all of them.